Hi, welcome back. I'm very happy to introduce our next guest, Gilles Fedak. He is the co-founder and CEO of iExec. Thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you.
Would you like to start with explaining a little bit to our online viewers about iExec?
Yes, sure. So iExec is the first marketplace for cloud computing resources. Okay, so the idea is that we're creating a decentralized marketplace where anyone, could be individuals, could be companies, can monetize the servers, can monetize their applications or their data sets. And so this is very new. We do it in a decentralized way, using blockchain technology, in particular using the Ethereum blockchain.
So there's definitely some questions going to arise, such as payment, security, availability. Let's start with payment. How does payment to access your services work?
Yeah, that's really important. You're absolutely right. We issued the RSC token about a year ago during crowd sale, and this RSC token is going to be the only way of payment within the network. Why is that important? Because it's also related to security. You know, the problem is with this kind of technology is that you're going to execute on a machine that you don't necessarily trust. Mm-hmm. So the question is, if I pay for this machine and the machine doesn't do the job, there's a problem. So the way we do that is that we are building a technology on top of this token. And when machines are ready to execute an application, we ask them somehow to stake the token. After that, there is an algorithm that we call proof of contribution, the consensus algorithm, that somehow try to evaluate if people did right or if they did wrong. And if they did wrong, protocol punishes them by distributing the stake amongst the actors that did right. Mm-hmm. So the RSC token is very essential, and the consensus protocol we are building on top of that is essential to the safety and security of this infrastructure.
So what about security at the actual hardware level to ensure, for example, like disaster recovery? Let's say you have put your data in this decentralized cloud system and you want to retrieve it, but however, one of the data centers had a fire or flooding.
Yeah, absolutely.
How would you ensure the data's longevity and it continues to be there?
Exactly. So that's a good question. Typically, you have solutions regarding this issue by using redundancy. So redundancy is the idea of you are copying the same data on several places so that if one fails, you can still recover on another.
So almost like sharding the data across the
It could be
the
sharding
network?
the data, yes, it could be. The issue with sharding the data, yes, it could be. There are several protocols to do that and several solutions. You mentioned hardware security. Mm-hmm. There's something really new that is coming now that we call enclaves. Enclaves, it's proposed by Intel, and the commercial name for that is Intel EGX. So this is the idea of, with your processor, there is a part of the memory that is encrypted, and it is kept encrypted, and so that even the owner of the machine, even if the administrator of the machine cannot access to this part of the memory that is encrypted. Mm-hmm. And so thanks to this new technology, there is a lot of things that we are not able to do before that we can do now. And for instance, one of the questions is typically with privacy of the data. So I'm using a machine, the machine is remote, I don't necessarily trust the machine. If I send data to this machine, how can I make sure that the data will not leak, that people will not be able to spy on what's going on? Mm-hmm. So thanks to this technology, we can do this kind of scenario.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So there's, in clouds, the competitive field is actually quite strong. There's, the major players that we know of, Amazon Web Services, Azure, Google Cloud, for example. What would your ideal user be? Would that be a company putting certain kind of data onto iExec, or who would you vision the ideal user is?
So we are building a marketplace. So we don't exactly have users. We are building a marketplace. So the idea is to attract customers and providers. And the more demand and the more offer, the better. Okay. So typically, in terms of customers, these are applications, developer businesses using applications that have significant requirements regarding the computing power and computing capacity. So typically like artificial intelligence, simulations, 3D rendering, finance. Typically artificial intelligence, you have to train the neural network, for instance, and this is really compute intensive, and sometimes can also be data intensive.
Yes. Yeah.
So typically these are really the good customers. So they would go in this marketplace to have access to cheaper computing resources. So on the offer side, here you would have either cloud companies, could be traditional cloud companies, could be one of them, could be data centers, or what we also envision is what we could call a public worker pool. This is our own terminology. But public worker pool, it's the idea of the individuals will join. It's a little bit like mining pool. So if you know how mining works, when you're a miner, an individual miner, you usually join a mining pool, and the mining pool makes sure that you have something to compute. Okay, so it's the same idea as an individual. If your PC is idle, you can monetize your PC by joining a worker pool, and then the worker pool will execute this computation. And our goal is to balance the demand and the offer and attract as many players in this decentralized marketplace.
So it would allow almost anyone with extra server space to join the network?
Absolutely, that's the idea. The idea is to have a market that is as open as possible.
Fantastic. So one of the things that are interesting, well, when we're talking about cloud, or in any kind of database really, is GDPR here in Europe. Data privacy. How does iExec tackle it with data not, for example, having to leave the European borders of European citizens?
So that's an excellent question. So in this marketplace, people are identified. So if you have constraints such as I don't want my data to go, abroad, you can filter. And make sure that the providers that are going to compute will fill those requirements. Okay, so it's an open network, but there is some control over this network.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So what are the kind of challenges that you see with adopting cryptocurrency as a payment, for example? Because cloud computing, we all know that the competitive prices are getting very, very low these days. So with cryptocurrency, do you see mostly adopting your iExec for the existing cryptocurrency community, but also onboarding traditional partners?
So right now we are first addressing what we call the dApps. So the dApps, these are these decentralized applications built on top of the blockchain, and that have really this idea of decentralization really, at the core of their business model. So for them, there is definitely no friction going in cryptocurrency. This is what they do, on a day-to-day basis. And for them, we are really solving a problem, which is a problem related to the scalability issue. You know that if you're programming for Ethereum, for instance, the amount of computing power you can have when you deploy a smart contract on Ethereum is extremely low, and you have to pay for the computation, for the execution of the smart contract. So this is very expensive. So we are giving them a solution to do off-chain computing. Okay, so they can deploy their application as a regular Docker image, and we're giving them the link between the blockchain and the traditional way of executing an application. So for them, there's no friction going with cryptocurrency. Once the market has significantly evolved, and once we have a lot of cloud providers, public worker pool, etc., we expect the price of this market to be probably cheaper than centralized cloud provider, because there's going to be more competition. And in this case, we can expect that people will come from the traditional cloud computing to this decentralized version of cloud computing. That could make sense. For sure.
So actually, you could almost use iExec also as a disaster recovery kind of strategy, because you're decentralizing across several different regions instead of to one major centralized database, for example.
So we are not focusing on storage, and to be honest, we are more focusing on computation than storage, even though we will allow for monetization of data set. So typically we would work in conjunction with people doing things that are more storage oriented. With respect to disaster recovery, it's clear that when you are decentralized thing, when you are distributing things, that's a general way of thinking, but usually you avoid you're giving you a best chance of recovering in terms of disaster. So it's true that you can very well go on iExec for the purpose of finding several places where your computation would happen to make sure that there are good properties of failure tolerance, this kind of things. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, is there anything you'd like to share with our online audience?
We are here at BlockShow. We are on booth number 5. Please feel free to join us and meet us. We'll be happy to answer all of your questions.
Fantastic. I really appreciate you joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.